And we're back, and welcome to the Constitution Line by Line. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier. I teach history at McMurray University. My colleague teaches political science.
Yes, indeed. And we're going through the Constitution line by line. And we're at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 13.
Still talking about the powers of Congress.
That's right. You ready?
Ready.
To provide and maintain a navy. Da-da-da.
Period?
That's it.
That's it. That's the line.
That's the line.
The Congress has the power to build a navy and maintain it.
Exactly. And it's building on the previous one to raise and support armies.
Okay. But the armies you could only support for 2 years. The Navy, it's open-ended.
I don't know if I want to make that interpretation. Clearly, the appropriation of money is with the Army.
Sure.
In the previous line, but the previous line did not end with the period.
So it's a comma.
Semicolon.
Huh.
So
maybe that 2 years applies to the Navy, maybe it doesn't.
Maybe it
Here's
does,
why I
maybe
think
it doesn't.
Here's why I think it doesn't.
Okay, go ahead, because it says to provide and maintain a Navy.
Correct.
And I can see your argument already. Go ahead.
All right, so boats last longer than 2 years. They're a durable good.
Well, let's be honest. What is it? The USS Constitution and the Constellation? The original, what are they called?
Well, Constitution's a frigate. Constellation's a later generation frigate.
Okay.
So the Constellation that's in Baltimore Harbor
Right.
is actually a 19th century vessel. Constitution is an 18th century vessel.
Okay, well, the Constitution still exists today. It's still
correct. Now there's not a scrap of wood on it that's original. Well, I say that there's maybe 3 or 4 pieces, but yeah, it is still a commissioned warship in the United States Navy.
Right.
So
we are still maintaining that Navy
we're
from the
much longer than 2 years, which actually kind of reinforces my point. What is interesting about the Navy is a Navy costs you money, whether it's deployed or sitting in harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be maintained because there's all sorts of stuff in the ocean that eats everything. All right, so Congress is extraordinarily sensitive to how it spends the public's money, the public trust, at least back then.
I was going to say.
Not now.
Really?
Now it's just, the goodie bag.
Right.
But
what is Everett Dirksen's old line? $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and soon you're talking real money.
That's right. I'm reminded of casting out trinkets captured from the Gauls to keep the plebs happy. But the Navy during the American Revolution was ad hoc at best. And, perhaps the most famous vessel in the American Navy was the Bonhomme Richard.
Mm-hmm.
With John Paul
Jones.
That's right, and defeating Serapis off the coast of England. But that was an old French freighter.
Hence the name.
That's right.
That French name.
That's right. And so it was just weaponized. It was militarized in order to try to conduct a guerre de course, or a war against commerce off the coast of England, essentially harass British shipping. There was no real comprehensive approach to making an American battle fleet. Mm-hmm. Mostly it was, hey, we need some boats on Lake Champlain, let's whip them together. Hey, we need some boats on the Delaware, let's whip them together. And so what happens is the United States figures out that boats are going to be critical to protect commerce. Mm-hmm. Lest somebody else get their version of the Bonhomme Richard and raid American commerce, and that's actually what starts happening soon after this is written and ratified and adopted. There's a lot of U.S. ships being picked off by both the British and the French, all tied up with the contest between the British and the French back in Europe. And so the United States' first real Navy is a design competition, in which they throw out specs and say, we need a ship that hits harder than a British frigate and can move faster than a British frigate, but something less than the lumbering ships of the line, which were the main capital ships of their day. And so what ends up happening is the generation of vessels, including USS Constitution. Mm-hmm. And these ships are really designed to patrol sea lanes in the Caribbean and will ultimately, in the first projection of U.S. power, patrol sea lanes in the Mediterranean.
Whoa.
Oh, absolutely. And so, we don't, as soon as we have a Navy, guess what we start doing? We start doing power projection overseas. And I think that Congress was afraid of getting that genie out of the bottle. But they can't see a way around it, so they have to appropriate and maintain funds for a Navy. And that's why I think it's not limited to 2 years. I think that will be the principal tool of power projection for the United States for the foreseeable future.
And it was. It still is today.
Well, it especially is today. I mean, there was a time when we let it lapse, and that's in the mid-19th century, and American warships were obsolete worldwide.
Right.
And then Chester Alan Arthur came back and modernized it, and then we have
Teddy Roosevelt.
and the Great White Fleet. Yeah. So, anyhow, the Navy's always been front and center in the mind of American political thinkers because they know what navies do.
Yeah, they are probably the most effective way to project power.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, even today, the United States has sent over an aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, over to the Middle East to send a message to Iran. And, modern day, you not just send over an aircraft carrier, it's a whole fleet.
It's an aircraft carrier group, yeah.
That goes with it. Plus, also, we're sending over B-52s as well to just reinforce the message. But, of course, the main thing, of course, is that aircraft carrier.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, too, that when aviation technology is developed, there's a lot of similar language about aircraft, as ships and things like that. So it's like an air fleet as opposed to a surface fleet. And that's kind of the way we think. And, we got these little green army men that we can pay for 2 years. And they'll do some stuff, too. But ultimately, we're going to blockade your ports. We're going to intercept your commercial vessels. And
because it's all about commerce.
Well,
as a way to enforce
it is.
Whatever the doctrine is that the administration wants to
That's
enforce.
exactly right. And it's not until after about 1887 with Alfred Thayer Mahan's book on the influence of sea power on world history that you have the idea of a fleet in being that will then go and fight another nation's fleet in being and thus determine the outcomes of wars. But he essentially says the country with the most ships wins.
Right.
And that has certainly been doctrine since then within the United States.
Yeah, and just to bring this up to date, one of the things that we're confronting is that China is in the process of building up its Navy fleet.
It is.
With the stated goal of having more than 500 ships.
Correct.
In their Navy. The United States' goal is about 325.
Correct.
So if you buy the
Mahan
stated theory, then China is clearly doing more than the United States and will have the ability to do more than the United States. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it than just having X number of ships.
Yeah, because I can get some old scow and
exactly.
say it's a commissioned ship.
It's the equipment that you have. It's the ability of people to fight. It's the technology you have, that sort of stuff. It's also where you want to project your power.
Correct.
China, as an example, projects power around itself, around the South China Sea, the East China Sea. The United States is busy projecting power worldwide.
Globally.
And so
that's why the Chinese are building islands and we're building aircraft carriers.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, go back to the framers.
They were thinking boats.
They were thinking boats.
Boats with guns on them.
Incredibly important, and to maintain those boats because they clearly saw them as we need to protect ourselves and we need to project ourselves.
Because it's a commercial document. It's an economic document as much as it's political.
He's making these points, isn't he?
All right, so that's our line?
That is our line.
All right, so we'll pick up the next enumerated power in the next episode. Thanks.